There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm James Carberry.
And I'm Jonathan Green.
Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. Today's episode is brought to you by Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. We are here today with Nikki Barua. She is the CEO of BeyondCurious. She's also the author of Beyond Barriers. Nikki, how are you doing today?
Excellent. Thanks for having me, James.
I am excited to chat with you today, Nikki. We're going to be talking about the importance of speed. And this is something that I'm very passionate about. One of my virtual mentors, Gary Vee, talks about this principle a ton, and you are going to be unpacking it with a really tangible framework today. But before we get into that, I'd love to have you explain to our audience a little bit about why you are the person to be talking about this. Can you tell us a little bit about BeyondCurious and what you and your team are up to over there?
Absolutely. So I am the CEO and founder of BeyondCurious, which is an Agile digital transformation firm. And we help large organizations think and act with the agility of a startup. You see, we're going through a ton of change right now across the board where competition is changing, technology is changing, customer expectations are changing. And the number one survival skill in this day and age for people and for organizations is being able to adapt to change quickly. But that tends to be a huge problem for big companies because big companies are really like elephants. You know, they compete on their size. And so they tend to be market leaders because they're big and they have massive scale and they have huge market share. But that's no longer enough. It's not enough to simply be big anymore because a fast-moving competitor can come and steal your market share overnight because they're, swiping sideways and you can't react fast enough to that. So what's necessary for big companies to continue to hold on to their market leadership is to compete not just on size but on speed as well. And that's what my company does is we help, these large companies develop the strategies and the solutions that help them get to market faster and compete faster, better, and more effectively than the others. And so that's why I say we're in the business of making elephants run.
I love it. And so your new book that was recently released called Beyond Barriers kind of unpacks a kind of a three-part framework, if you will, of an approach to having more agility, having more speed, and it's broken down into kind of three sections: clarity, courage, and conviction. I would love to just dive right in here and start talking really about kind of the clarity piece and why this is the first kind of section of the book, why it's so crucial to the rest of this framework really working to get an organization to the point where they can get to market faster, they can operate faster. Can you elaborate on the clarity and its importance to this, the importance of speed?
Absolutely. So the inspiration for the book really came out of, my experience as an expert and a thought leader in the space of building agile organizations and being going from a legacy business to a digital business. And what I found was that the same things that hold people back tend to be very similar in terms of what holds companies back, which is, we're all, born with innate gifts and talents, just like companies have their core competencies. But a lot of times that's held back because of barriers in three dimensions. Number one, there's a barrier of clarity, not knowing who you are, what you want, and why you want it. And if you don't have that clarity of purpose and you don't really know what you seek and why that matters, then it doesn't matter how much effort you put into it. You're not going to achieve the results. Number two is, if you have the clarity, you have to have the courage to follow through and to take those actions. And we tend to be held back by fear and all of that. And the third is if you've gone down that path, then you have to have the conviction to stay the course and not give up. And so really the book framework outlines the same principles that we use in our business to help large companies transform, is giving them the clarity, courage, and conviction to unleash their full potential and to become agile organizations. The reason why clarity is the most fundamental step one is that for any organization, whether you look at it in terms of the business they're in or the marketing they're doing, it all begins with knowing exactly what it is and why it's important. And in the ways in which we help our clients, what we oftentimes find is that they don't have a lack of resources. If anything, they have a lot of resources, a ton of money, a lot of talent, and lots of ideas. The issue is not the resources. The issue is clarity of what is the most important thing to do and why that is the case. I know of one particular client that had been working on this very important game-changing initiative that they knew would make or break their business. They had spent over 24 months working on this thing. They had 1,200 ideas, and they were some of the smartest people working in the management team, but they could not move forward because they couldn't get their head around which one of those 1,200 ideas to go forward with. So that's an example of lack of clarity that keeps you stuck in inertia. So the way to get from inertia to momentum is you have to have clarity. And that's why that's the most important thing.
Are there any kind of best practices, or how does someone, for the person listening to this, they're struggling with clarity and really identifying what that is, what's something they can do to help push them closer to that?
Yeah, what helps to drive clarity is better intelligence. If you know exactly, if you have a better picture of your landscape and your context, then you're much more likely to take action. We tend to be paralyzed when we don't know what it is that exists around us or what it is that matters to us. So not knowing causes paralysis. And so in order to go towards action, you have to know more. And so at BeyondCurious, one of the things that we help our clients do is what we call Agile intelligence. And it's essentially, if you think about a legacy business versus a digital business, a true digital business is able to go from data to insights to action very, very quickly, probably in days, where they're aggregating all of the data, whether it's about their customers or it's about the market or the competition. They get that data very quickly. They're not only aggregating that, but they're seeing the patterns and turning those patterns into insights very quickly. And therefore now they know what actions to take. In a traditional business, so if you're working with a traditional company that doesn't have that kind of, capability, chances are it takes them months to aggregate the data. Chances are they're getting 40% of the picture, 60% of it they're not even capturing. And so as a result of that, they don't have full visibility into what is happening around them. And if you don't have the visibility, you lack the clarity. And because you lack the clarity, you end up doing a lot of stuff but not getting the right outcomes. So being intelligent about how you gather the insights quickly and in a more effective way is key to getting that full picture that propels you forward.
I love sharing growth stories, and I have a good one for you today. It's about a company called SentinelOne. This challenger cybersecurity brand was set out to disrupt the endpoint protection space. Their brand was top-notch, their product was innovative, but they were struggling to gain traction online in an already developed industry. Then they found Directive Consulting, a B2B search marketing agency. Within the first quarter of working with Directive, SentinelOne was able to increase their organic traffic by 128% and overall lead volume by an outstanding 251%. I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview. The second piece that we're going to talk about, Nikki, is courage. Talk to us about kind of what does this mean and why is it important when it comes to becoming faster and giving the organization more speed?
Yeah, so with courage, if you have clarity of purpose, so you know what you should be doing, it doesn't mean much unless you start taking action. But if having worked with so many large organizations in so many different industries, one of the common patterns I observed was that there's hesitation to take action because three things get in the way. Number one, there's fear of failure, that I know I should be doing this, but I'm afraid to do it because what if I fail? What if this project fails and I lose my job? Or what if it damages my reputation? What is my boss going to say? What is my peer going to say? So there's fear of failure. Secondly, there's a lack of confidence of not knowing, how to go about this, process. And so, they're afraid to try things out because they make the problem too big. And so they're afraid to sort of take those steps and be confident in going down any kind of execution. And finally, even when you do encounter failure, how do you turn it into an advantage and a learning opportunity and not be held back by it and say, okay, we failed, let's just give up. Instead of that, you go into, okay, we failed, what did we learn? That just means that path doesn't work. How do we try something different? So the whole concept around courage is all about, using technology and applications and platforms that allow you to experiment faster. At the end of the day, if you make big problems smaller, you're much more likely to take action because your failure is limited to very small portions. And instead of being overwhelmed and terrified of massive failures or terrified of not knowing how to take action, you can take a big problem, make it really small. And so the way we do that is we turn these massive initiatives into tiny sprints. And so all we're doing is, building platforms and products in a sprint-based approach that allows our clients to learn and take risks in small bite-sized chunks. So instead of being terrified and paralyzed by the fear of failure or looking at something as a zero-sum game, you can keep pivoting and keep adapting from there.
Love it. So clarity, courage. The third piece of this equation, Nikki, is conviction. Expand on this one for us.
So this is particularly key in business. And something that we're probably all familiar with if we're in the B2B world. One of the challenges that we often encounter in business is everyone was at the goal line, super excited to take on this big initiative and take on this big project. Everyone's all pumped. And then you start doing this work and you encounter the first big barrier and people start getting deflated. You encounter the second barrier and they're even more deflated. By the third barrier, they're ready to shut down the project and initiative and say, forget it, this didn't work, let's just give up. And that mindset really, comes from not having the conviction to follow through no matter what. And because we associate, instead of looking at it as an opportunity for us to learn and adapt, we attach too much meaning to there's only one path to doing that. So conviction in the long haul for any company to become really agile and to constantly adapt, you have to become a learning organization. You have to go from being a company that knows it all to a company that learns all the time. And to be that kind of living organism that's saying, every time we pivot and adapt and every time we fail, we learn something. We get better and better. And that's what gives us the conviction to keep going because we're getting better over time. And so conviction is all about how do you keep learning, how do you keep adapting, and how do you keep celebrating because you want to recognize the milestones of how far you've come, not just how far you have to go.
I love it. So Nikki, in talking about clarity, courage, conviction, I think you've done an incredible job of unpacking each of these and how they directly correlate to an organization's ability to move faster, which ultimately in today's environment is going to allow them to win. If there's somebody listening to this, they want to stay connected with you, they want to learn more about your company, BeyondCurious, they want to check out your book, what's the best way for them to go about doing those things?
The best way to get in touch, follow us at BeyondCurious.com. You can reach out to me personally at NikkiBarua.com. We're always sharing thought leadership insights on the latest trends and principles and tips on how this could work, especially in the B2B world. This is a space that we're actively involved as a catalyst in transforming. So I look forward to staying connected with the audience and helping out.
I love it. Again, Nikki, thank you so much for your time today. This has been fantastic, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
There are lots of ways to build a community, and we've chosen to build the B2B growth community through this podcast. But because of the way podcasts work, it's really hard to engage with our listeners. And without engagement, it's tough to build a great community. So here's what we've decided to do. We're organizing small dinners across the country with our listeners and guests. No sales pitches, no agenda, just great conversations with like-minded people. We'll talk business, we'll talk family, we'll talk goals and dreams. We'll build friendships. So if you'd like to be a part of a B2B growth dinner in a city near you, go to b2bgrowthdinners.com. That's b2bgrowthdinners.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.